Unica, government contracting is one of your areas of specialty. What is the number one barrier that you have seen keeps people from getting in government contracting or staying in it and being successful at it?
Oh, I think that, I mean, beyond the obvious sort of compliance effort and making sure that you've checked all the boxes in the RFP when you submit, I think the other barrier is that people sometimes think about this very transactionally and not from a relationship oriented space. And I love that you asked, how do you get in and how do you stay?
Mhm.
Because it's one thing to get in and go, oh, I've, cashed my check and put in the invoice. It's another when you express concern for the human beings you're serving and making sure that they're having a good experience. So this is kind of the client experience, customer experience piece that I think is the difference in why some people get ousted. You go, well, that person's had a contract with them doing this for 20 years. How did they lose it? Their favorite person left and they didn't put in a succession plan to make sure that the handoff was smooth and that they could have confidence that they were going to get the same quality service that they've come to trust.
Mm.
That is the stay in power that I think a lot of people miss.
Oh, that's
And
good.
so that would be my big like sort of secret. Like you can assume like, okay, you didn't comply with the RFP, you forgot to sign page 4. That's how you don't get in.
Mhm.
But really sort of building and fostering relationships and understanding people buy from people. I know people are in the having spaces and conversations about like, well, how do we get AI to score this or AI to respond to it? But still, even in those instances, you've got human touches that are using AI to write the RFP. You've got people who are using AI to respond, write the responses. Like, so these are parts, but they still require human touches. So that's the thing I like to remind people. And I actually had a wonderful conversation just yesterday. We were preparing to go to the Society of American Military Engineers, excuse me, Society of American Military Engineers small business conference later this month. And we're talking about the 1 year later lessons learned of AI and proposal development process. And some of the feedback from some of my experts on the panel, they said, look, it's great if you can use these tools to expedite your process, but we need your thumbprint. We need to know that this is you, this is your brand, there's a human behind this. We don't want soulless documents. And so that's what I remind people. Your staying power is about being human and making those connections.
Mm. Now, are you talking about the relationships between the person who's submitting the proposal, and I don't even know if I know what that's called, so I'll have to ask you to help me with that name.
Oh, okay. So yeah, let's take a step back. And so
Okay.
there are a few key relationships you want to really focus on getting. Like obviously, contracting officer. That's pretty much gate one. This is the person who's responsible for making sure that okay, we've got an apples to apples comparison of everybody who's responded to this RFP. We've decided what the scoring criteria is. We've defined the scope of work very clearly. So if we want, for you to do a roadway design project, we've ironed out exactly what those details look like. It's 1 mile. We need you to repave it. Those sort of like level of details, or if I need 10,000 pencils and I need them by Thursday. Not a literal, example, but they are the people who are putting that sort of information together. So getting to know them is always helpful and beneficial. And these might not be like these super cozy relationships. There's a lot of regulation around the kinds of gifts and interactions you can have with agencies. For example, if something is coming out that you're particularly interested in, and it's coming out in maybe 30 days, they may not actually meet with you if you request a meeting, not because they don't want to talk to you, but because they're in the cone of silence. And in that period, the cone of silence, they're not allowed to have conversations with people that would give even the perception that they've got favorites going into the bid. So that's some of the stuff you have to think about going into your proposal process.
Oh,
Other
what,
people you might want relation.
what's an RFP? I'm sorry.
Oh, request for proposal. I have got to be careful. I've been doing this for a decade, so all of this is like second nature to me. So thank you for stopping and asking that question so that I can make sure I keep up with the audience. So you'll hear me say RFP is a request for proposal, RFI is a request for information, and RFQ. These are three commonly used terms, as they're not all of them, but this is kind of your baseline for you to understand. With an RFI or request for information, understand this is literally just them sort of doing their own market research, understanding who is in the marketplace that might be capable of providing these services. This is also an opportunity where you can respond, and obviously you want to answer exactly the questions they've asked. But if you would like to include additional information, if they've got space for you to do that or there's permission for that, you can add additional information to help them understand some of the key factors that are impacting the marketplace so that they can make a better assessment about what they're asking for and if it's realistic. And so the request for information, I like to tell people, this is not where the money comes from. This is just you informing the person who might buy from you. So don't get upset when you put in a response to an RFI and go, well, I didn't get a response on whether or not we won or lost. That's because that's not what this is for. This is just a request for information. This is, okay, I need to buy this hyper specialized thing, or maybe it's a general thing anybody can do. Do I purchase this from a small business because we've got enough small businesses in the marketplace that can fulfill this? Does this need to be fulfilled by a major company, a corporation, someone who has adequate capacity? Like those are the things they're assessing in their market research. What is a reasonable price for this? Those are the things that they're looking to really grasp when they're putting out a request for information. So that's sort of term one. RFP, RFQ, these are often used interchangeably. It's a request for proposal or request for price or request for qualifications or quotations. And so proposals sometimes can include price only. Sometimes they can be price and narrative, or they can just be narrative. A lot of times with proposals, you'll also see that sometimes there are multiple phases. And so phase one might be something very simple. They might ask you for a 10-page documented response. The second phase could very well be an interview, actually, in person or on Zoom for your request for proposal. Request for quotations is generally more price oriented. You'll see sometimes people use the different language. RFQ, or request for qualifications. That's the other Q sort of word you'll see in the RFQ space. And so this is usually a package that's going to ask for things like resumes for your key personnel. It might ask you who your team and partners would be. There might be a technical approach sort of section. A lot of these are outline specific page numbers. They might say you need to have half-inch margins. It must be Times New Roman 12-point font. Your graphics can be no longer, no smaller than 9-point font. And all of these details matter. If you do not comply with these details, this is a great way for disqualification. And so a lot of people think, well, I answered the question, but you did it in 11-point font. It's going in the trash. And I don't think people appreciate that enough, because sometimes they receive a lot of responses. So could you imagine the opportunity to go, I got 100 responses on my desk and I really don't want to read every single word of them. If I can open this up and go to page 10, where I know most people forget to sign, they didn't sign it, disqualified. Okay, on to the next pieces of document, pieces of documents on my desk to review. So that's something I like to tell people. It's not just about like the scope of work and, well, can I do every single thing in the scope? Are you also able to follow the instructions about how to respond? Mm-hmm. That's something that's easily overlooked and taken for granted. They go, oh, it's done, it's 10 pages. But did you do 1-inch margins or half-inch margins? Did you hole punch through the text if you had to do a hand delivery?
Oh, wow. Okay.
They can't read that then.
Right.
Like those are little things you have to be mindful of. Did you put the wrong date on the front cover?
Wow.
Yeah, like a lot of times, like they'll get into the details of like what the front cover needs to look like. They might tell you there are no photos to be allowed, especially in a lot of the federal sort of core engineers proposals. I've seen this a lot. They go, look, we don't want any images, strictly text, comply with this form. And you'll see that sometimes they are what I like to call free form, where they're going to give you specific instructions of what needs to be included. But then you've got some leeway about like what color this is going to be. Do I want it 2 columns, for the document? Like you might have that sort of leeway, so to speak. And I know that sounds like zero leeway when we're talking about they've dictated the margins and the page font size and, must be recycled paper. Like you'll get these sorts of requirements. It must be recycled paper, 25-pound paper, whatever weird specification someone has. You got to meet all of those. Whereas if you're doing a response at something like a standard form 330, the standard form 330 is extremely prescriptive. So you're going to go through sections 8. So there's 2 parts. There's part 1 and there's part 2. Part 1 is going to be a package, section A through D, and that's going to be where you name all your team and partners. You're going to include all of the roles that they're going to be engaged in. You're going to so that's sort of part A through D. D is where you're going to put in your organization chart. So these are things like you won't learn unless you have to be in the weeds on these files and do them regularly. So then you put in your organization chart. Make sure the organization chart completely aligns with what they put in the scope and the people you might need. And if they need have a certain certification, you need to make sure that you're clearly illustrating that in the org chart and in section E on your resume. So they're not guessing, well, does this person have a project management certification? We can't tell. If you didn't write PMP on the org chart and then put it in the resume, and if they ask for a copy of the certification, all of those boxes need to be checked in your document response. Those are some of the things you have to think about or responding to government contracts is the compliance piece. And I won't bore you guys walking through every single section of a 330 because there's resumes, there's project descriptions, we get 10 of this only. Section G, you gotta match the people to the projects. Like it's a lot of little details that you've got to be mindful of. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, it's not compliant, or even if it is compliant, is it compelling? And that's the other bar I think that people think about. Like, oh, well, I answered it. I got this generic stuff from AI. I go back to my buddies I talked to yesterday as we're preparing for the small business conference and talking about harnessing AI. They don't want to read generic stuff that looks like they could have, snatched it off of Google real quick. Like that's not what they're looking for. Like they're looking for a depth and breadth of expertise in it. I mean, and I will even say, admittedly, this may fly on some things that are not as highly competitive. Like, so don't count yourself out if you want to take a stab at it and it's going to take you, 2 or 4 hours. But if you're going to invest tens of thousands of dollars on people who get paid $100 an hour to write stuff for you, you want to be really, really confident in the fact that you've got the capabilities to deliver and to be compelling and clear in your argument about why you're that person for the agency. So that's just some of the things I like for people to think about going in. It's easy to go, okay, this is, 50K bid, to get toilet paper out, or PR services is a different animal than I'm looking for $1 billion or $900 million for disaster recovery services. The bar is different. Right. In terms of demonstrated expertise and capability. So that's something I like to remind people of. And they go, well, I don't have all the quals. Sometimes you got to really figure out the levers to pull to know when you have to have audacity and when you need to go be a sub-consultant. Like, and so.
I like that.
So figuring that out, I think is part of the trick. I think what I'm excited about for this upcoming conference is their focus this year. And I think this is a good focus for anyone in business, is driving strategic partnerships. And so these don't necessarily have to be, well fleshed out joint ventures. These might just be, loosely agreed upon alliances that goes, look, if these opportunities come out, can you send me an email about it? Let me know if we can partner together. And if we together have the capabilities to win this particular opportunity. To that point, I will say, if you are going to be formally in a joint venture, one of the things you want to do is not wait until the bid is issued to file all your paperwork in sam.gov. If you need it, because you're going to need a custom UEI, all of the, and that's, forget the acronym, forgive me, it's more or less the government's version of a social security number for your business.
This is for the partnership.
No, this applies both to businesses and joint ventures. So if you're going to be prepared to get Gov, I said, let's walk back. Get GovCon ready for an individual business. The process is the same. If you're going to form a joint venture, you have to make sure that you've got stuff in place specifically for the joint venture because it's a new entity. So speaking of what you need to be prepared for as an entity, whether you're a part of a joint venture or an individual company, you want to make sure, obviously, you've got your business registered, whether it's an S Corp, LLC, however you need to structure it. They're not generally super concerned about the structure of your business so much as they are about making sure that you've got, appropriate accounting processes in place. There are certain contracts I've seen over the years where you need to have, an actual audit that really clarifies, okay, these are your appropriate overhead rates and they've been verified and vetted. There may be limitations on how much overhead you can actually charge and cushion into the contract pricing. So those are things you have to think about, as in terms of being GovCon ready. Do I have appropriate accounting systems in place? Do I have my UEI, which replace the DUNS number? I should clarify that as well. You may see some forms that ask for a DUNS number. So best interest to probably just get both. They're both free. So it's the matter of, getting on the DUNS website and getting that. Usually comes back in minutes. Your EIN or and UEI, all that stuff comes back in usually a matter of days. Sometimes the complication with joint ventures is obviously you've got to structure this business. So you're going to go to your SunBiz or whatever sort of organization, whether it's a county level or state, level organization for your business, get all that set up. Then you need to go to sam.gov, register yourself as an entity, get your cage codes, all of this stuff in order so that you can be ready to respond. Because a lot of times the forms will ask, okay, what's your cage code? What's your unique identification number? That's a UEI. or DUNS number. You'll see them both sort of interchangeably. And DUNS is in some instances really focused on your credit worthiness as a business. And that's something that's really important to government agencies. They may not necessarily ask for your DUNS number, but some of the language in an RFP is likely to include, can you tell us about the financial stability of your company? In some form or fashion, they're going to ask that, whether it's when did you get into business? How long have you been in business? Because you name similar clients you serve. Like there's a vetting process. That's a lot of the intention behind the request that you're going to get in an RFP is we want to know that you're a stable business, that if we hire you for a 5-year contract, heck, a 2-year contract, that you're not going to be insolvent and disappear on us.
Right.
Like, so that's the stuff you have to think about getting into GovCon. From a get GovCon ready standpoint, I think the other thing is important to do is to have a capability statement ready. So sometimes it's as simple as getting that sort of content in front of folks where we talk about the UEI, DUNS number, quick understanding of your NAICS codes. And so NAICS codes are basically the specialized codes that identify the types of services your company provides. So for example, I'll never for the rest of my life forget 541330 because it's for engineering services.
You use it a lot.
Yeah. So like I've seen it a lot, but those are things. And so if you're trying to figure out like which NAICS code, that's NAICS. I should also explain that applies to your business. You can Google it. It'll take you to a site. You can type in your services and it breaks down a list just so you can find out which services kind of fall under it. There's some that are like other services if you're not really quite sure where you align, but I want you to be aware, like there's a broad option of services there. There's also, in addition to NAICS codes, you might also see SIC codes, SIC. And so some of them use both, some of them got a preference for one or the other, but a lot of times you see RFPs, if you go to sam.gov and you're trying to figure out like, okay, what kind of contracts can I apply for? Obviously you can use your keyword search if you've got like actuarial services and type that in, but if you know the NAICS code, that might be an easier way to search. And then you can go in and you can filter down, okay, contracts that, are post-award, pre-award, whatever status. And people go, why would you look at post-award data? Well, there's a little bit of market research you can do here. So some of these awards are one-off contracts. Some of these are things that are going to be reissued every 5 years because the service is an ongoing need. And so say they've got a 5-year contract, and you might be able to go in and look at the history of the recompetes, figure out who the incumbents are. So perhaps you say, I don't feel positioned right now to pursue this as a prime consultant. I might want to consider being a sub-consultant. You can reach out to people who have active live contracts and ask to be added to their contracts, depending on the policies and arrangements they've gotten with the government. Maybe they got a sub that's doing a terrible job and they really need somebody that can weld. Okay, well, you got that skill, reach out and say, hey, I'm available, I'm capable. The worst thing they can do is tell you, no, I'm not interested or not answer. But that also applies to when the recompete comes up. Have you fostered or nurtured that relationship over the years while you're waiting to make sure that they understand that you are a good choice to add? Also, building your experience with other similar clients is really helpful. So then they say, hey, we would like your support in developing the past performance section. Could you send us 1 or 2 projects that are highly relevant? You've gone and you've worked with 2 or 3 similar agencies on smaller projects. So now you can go, look, here's my description. Here's what the client said. Maybe they were nice enough to fill out a CPARS, which is basically kind of like a review of your contract services, and they give you certain ratings, whether it's, good or very good or excellent. It really can vary depending on the opinion of the contracting officer and also your performance. But those things really matter in trying to build out your book of business. You can start small and you can take on, the below 250 threshold where there's a lot of opportunity just to sole source. Or if you're going for the bigger contracts, reaching out to the existing contract holders, expressing interest. This is something else I really like to teach people is that sometimes the opportunity and the way to attract the opportunity rather than chase it is to also engage in thought leadership. And so that's something I think a lot of people take for granted. Like, LinkedIn is free 99. What does it take for you to spend, 2 minutes each week saying, okay, here's a key thing that I know about my area of expertise and sharing it with people, like putting yourself out there and making them aware. Like people reach out to me regularly, like, how do you know about this? How do I learn more of that? How do I understand how to write proposals better? Like that's my niche in this particular industry is like, as a proposal writer, I have had a 50% win rate multiple years. I've got over $1 billion in wins to my name. Like, in a decade of writing. And I'm not talking, I've only worked on contracts that are $900 million. So I've worked on things that are as small as 30K at small businesses that are like, I'm just on the GSA schedule and I'm happy to be here. Like those are just some of the the things you have to keep in mind is, so I've gotten to write a lot of different things and work with a lot of different subject matter experts and adapt to their styles, really give them pointers on how to improve their writing, so that it's more effective, that it's more compelling and exciting for the readers. Because who wants to read Tuesday we did this, Wednesday we did this, and on Friday we plan to do, like, yes, you want to keep it simple and easy to follow, but you also don't need to be like, so dull that everybody goes to sleep when they get done reading it. They go, well, I don't know why the difference. This is the same as A and B. Like, which one's got the better price? Is it $2 difference? And sometimes it is just that simple, unfortunately. And I hate to say that to people. Sometimes it is price based sort of bid lane, and that's one of the things you'll have to like learn is like, okay, is this a cost driven sort of solicitation? A lot of that'll be spelled out in the bid for you, like we're just looking for best offer. Sometimes it's best value, and for them best value is not necessarily the lowest price.
Hmm.
That's the thing people have to understand. Like a best value bid is literally like value. Like, what do we need? Like maybe you're on the high to mid range, but what you offer in value add supersedes the cheapest person on the block who bid for us. And so that's what you have to understand. Like when you're reading these solicitations, okay, what is the basis for selection? Because if it's best value, you've got a better chance of not being the cheapest guy in the room and still winning.
Right. You have said a couple of things that is vernacular that I think we, as those of us who are listening, need clarification on. One,
Okay.
you said post reward and post award and pre award. When you say that, what are you
Uh-huh.
talking?
Okay, so pre-award basically being like before the solicitation has come out, that's an area of pre-award. But anything like before you've actually responded to the bid or there's a deadline. Post-award being this contract is we've reviewed all the quals, we've decided who won. That's what I mean by like post-award. And
Gotcha.
so I think I explained this in the context of like, how do you get in the door on this stuff if you don't have all the quals yet? I said, if pre-award, obviously you can kind of take a look. There's sometimes people who will fill out the interested bidders list on sam.gov and other solicitation sites. Should be clear. I'm speaking mostly from a federal perspective, but you've also got a lot of states and cities that have their own marketplace websites. So you can go to like Georgia Marketplace or Florida Marketplace websites and find different government contracts. And these are a wide variety of the types of work. So, I mean, I've talked mostly probably about professional services or like, technical services, but you can get like leadership consultant opportunities out of this. If you need public outreach is something I've actually gotten to do as a part of my career. We had a client when I was at JMT who said, look, we really need somebody to come out and spend time in the community, helping them understand a lot of the things that are coming forward with this upcoming transportation program that we're rolling out. So it's, 20, I think this is years ago now. So it was the 2030 sort of target program. And there were things that they wanted to do, but they wanted to survey the community and really understand what was important to them. We might think you want to widen this particular roadway and, add a park over here or whatever it was. They said, we want to make sure we actually speak to the people who are stakeholders here. And so
Mhm.
it's the kind of contracts you can get. You can do public outreach. It's not just the order toothbrushes or get me COVID tests. Like there's so many things you can do in GovCon. Um,
And then you said one more thing. So you either said solo or sole. The impression I got was you were saying if you're getting a small contract, so not everybody's going to work with big contracts.
Oh, like the set asides and the smaller business sort of contract. If you're pursuing something that's below a particular threshold, they don't have to do the same sort of level of competition where they put out this giant bid. They might go, okay, it's under 250K. I know that Uniqueka can do it. Let me hire her. It's
Oh, so that's
sometimes
a
just that
solo.
simple.
Now that makes
Um,
sense. And when you say that because it's under that certain threshold, they will work with Unica, are you saying because you can provide the service or you are the one you're the subcontractor of the service?
Oh, no, no. This is okay. There are certain regulations and acts in place that require that we, after a certain contract value, have a more fair and open process around who we hire. If it's below a particular threshold, depending on the type of service, the government can go, I'm aware of these four people from my sources, so I want to hire that one.
Oh, so they don't have to put out an RFP.
Right. Like, so they might go RFP, they might go RFI or sources sought. These are another word I didn't introduce earlier, but request for information or sources sought, very similar. They're both market research tools to gather data. Might go based on my research. this is the best option in the marketplace. Let me give Bob a call and give him a contract if he's interested. I mean, it's not that cut and dry, but it's pretty simplified in comparison to like write me a 100-page document, tell me why you're amazing, and then come interview with me, and then also give me a price quote.
Okay. Much easier to just go with one of the four people you already have on tap.
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
so that's some of the simplification that can happen. The other thing I think I mentioned earlier was the GSA schedule. The GSA schedule is not as open as something like SAM.gov. You actually have to apply to get a GSA schedule contract, and there's a wide variety of GSA contracts that focus on different service types. General Services Administration is the GSA. I should step back. Thank you. Acronym heavy. That means I've been immersed too long, y'all.
No, it means you're an expert.
Yeah, but General Services Administration. So they've got certain sort of contract schedules where they've budgeted out things that they want to get accomplished, whether it's, I'll go back to my engineering background. They're looking for, okay, we need small projects where people can conduct an environmental assessment on a particular site. And we've got, we need a few bids, but only people who have who are on that schedule can bid. And so you've already given them sort of a benchmark of your quals. And so it's generally similarly simplified sort of bid process, but it's also usually fast turn. So I've seen GSA schedule stuff come out. They go, look, we need this back in 2 days. And it's 5 pages, but it's due in 2 days.
That's a bit much. Sounds like.
Yeah. The bench is like they already vetted you to a certain level, so there's not so much content to hand over, but they do have to still, do some minimal sort of research and verification before they go, okay, we'll issue this. I saw that a lot, especially with like environmental stuff and historic preservation contracts. They go, we need this back in 4 days, or there's a log cabin out in Michigan that needs to be, inspected and making sure, is this something that qualifies to be on the historic registry? Like that's sometimes the work that you're doing as a historic preservation professional. Okay. So sometimes it's, a matter of time is actually of the essence in regard to getting stuff done. And sometimes it's just fast churn. I have said a lot very fast.
You've given us a ton. And I want to say, one, thank you. Two, I know I don't have a lot more of your time, but there's a couple of things I do want to ask. We had started with the people, and so you started with because you had started with the relationships, right?
Yeah.
Important. And we talked about the contract officer, if I got that name right.
Yes.
And then, so tell us the names of the other players.
So then with other players, you're looking at obviously the contracting officer, but the contracting officer is more or less the facilitator of the sale. They are not necessarily the end user of your product. So I'll use Department of Homeland Security. So you've got the procurement office, they're reviewing, they've got all the scope of work they put together in the RFP you've responded to. But now you're going to actually go serve somebody that's in a particular division of Department of Homeland Security. Maybe you're providing IT and cybersecurity services, for example. The people that you're actually going to work with have different job titles and roles than the folks in the procurement office. So this is where you take advantage of all these wonderful gifts we have, like LinkedIn and meeting notes. If there's public meetings and things of that nature, things you can go to figure out who are the key players there. I've done this a lot for my state and local sort of client stuff where I might go, well, there was a public meeting a month ago. Let me go look at the meeting notes and see who was there, who was in charge. And that's how you might get the name. Sometimes you get emails out of old newsletters and stuff.
Okay, I just want you to understand.
It's easy as looking on the website and looking at, the address book. Sometimes it's that easily found. Other times you kind of got to do a little bit of backdoor research or look at the capital improvement program. Those are things you look at sometimes to find out who you need to talk to. Those are oftentimes the decision makers. So then you're looking for like the directors of divisions. Mm-hmm. You were looking for people who are, VP sort of senior level titles. That's who you want to also connect with. And that's why I said leveraging LinkedIn is a gift, because if you're following and connected and engaging with these people, you're more likely to show up in their news feed. And so then they get to get acquainted with you informally. And so then you've got this informal sort of loose engagement. So when you pick the phone up and call, it's a less awkward conversation. I'm following someone who's a really good personal branding expert on LinkedIn now, and I engaged one of his posts, and this man called me because we had talked before, so I knew him, but he picked the phone up and called me and said, what a magical tactic. He said, well, I'm gonna give you this tidbit for free. He said, I realize if you engage my content, you're probably got a little bit of free time on your hands, and you're probably near your phone. So I called you.
Oh, and there you go.
And,
Uh,
and we spent 10 minutes chatting. He said, here are my goals for the year. Give me an update on what you're trying to accomplish. And so connection can be that simple.
mm,
I still laugh to this day about one of my early career phone calls. I spent 6 months trying to reach this particular person at DCDOT. I won't name him because it's an embarrassing story. But I spent 6 months. I had gotten all the other, I think it had 5 or 6 divisions total. I got all the other divisions on the phone. I had book meetings for my employer. I said, okay, we're gonna send this VP to this meeting. We're gonna send this one to that. Like, here's the stuff you need to know about this division. Here's the upcoming procurement forecast, which some agencies will give you. There's a forecast that you can just look up. Like, Army Corps of Engineers is a popular organization that gives out their procurement forecast. And then set a meeting with them and talk about what are their priorities, what are their biggest needs, what keeps them up at night.
mhm.
Um, and so I say that to say, like, finding people and getting that contact. Those are some of the people you need to get in touch with, like the decision makers, but also don't neglect the influencers, like the people who are like maybe next in line to be the leader of that organization, or the person actually does the doing. If you can figure those people out, sometimes that's also helpful, and sometimes even a back door where you go, look, hey boss, I know we were looking for so and so, I know a person, like, and then that helps them kind of build credibility in their organization, and gives you an opportunity to get in the room with a decision maker. The other way to get around decision makers is to go to conferences and events where they're going to show up. And whether you've got a booth you can display, or maybe you're an aspiring entrepreneur or getting started in your business, one of the other hacks I have learned from entrepreneurs recently is to volunteer.
At conferences,
Yes, like volunteer at the
right?
conferences. So you might lose a day to actually, serving food or cleaning something up, but then the other 2 days are yours to go out and network and connect. And so that's the ways you can get in rooms if you don't have a large budget. If you've got a great budget, put on a big old show in a booth, have a photo booth in the booth, connect people, get to know them. But those are some of the ways you can connect with decision makers, showing up where they are. And so if that's a booth display, but also if you can get on stage, make sure you're keeping an eye out for where these organizations are going. So if they're going to be at Society of American Military Engineers, for example, small business conference. There are people you want to network with, you know, big companies or small. This is where they all gather. You say, okay, I'm going to be at this conference as a volunteer. Sure, I don't have a large budget. But also, if that doesn't work out, maybe could you get on stage as a moderator? Could you get on stage as a speaker? When they have a call for abstracts about a year before, and sometimes it's not that long a notice, once you know that when they come out, think about what your thought leadership, areas are, where you really shine, and how that can serve the audience that's showing up there. Always keep your audience top of mind, whatever you create, whether it's a proposal or an abstract at a conference, and show up on stage. Now you've got a relatively captive audience that is ready to hear about why you're an expert in a particular space. And that's another good way to build credibility and grow your contacts pretty quickly. So where people go, oh, it's $3,000 to be at the conference. It's like the potential for ROI if you're working well is really good.
Yeah. So those are the relationships for the people you may actually be providing the work for. A couple of things
Yes.
I do want to clarify for you guys listening. Public meetings, when Uniqueka was saying public meetings, you can go get the notes. She's talking about, and correct me if I'm wrong, but she's talking about companies that are publicly traded where their information is public when they have meetings and that type of thing. Are there other companies that are not publicly traded?
But also look at the agencies, like, so, like, when the DOT has the public meeting,
The
like,
government
their
agency.
leadership has to often show up to those things to address the public. Like,
Where would we find those meeting notes?
I usually end up Googling them. Like,
Oh,
I
okay.
usually pick a few keywords of what
Right.
I'm looking for, or I'll go to the actual website of the organization, and then, meeting notes or similar language. And that's how I found them. Like, they're usually not on full display. When they are, that's like a Christmas gift. Um, but
Okay.
those are some of the tactics I have used to go, okay, well, how do I get what I need? Like, I mean,
Right.
it's good to go be able to pull up the org chart and find the name these days. That's a gift, and being able to go to LinkedIn, or see if you know somebody that they already know. Can they make a warm introduction?
Mhm.
Like, those are some tactics you can use. But when
Okay.
you're really down bad and looking for stuff, that's usually one of my, like, go to tactics. When I'm like, I'm out of ideas, how do I get what I need?
It does. Okay. So we've got contract officer, who is the individual in the government who has put out this RFP, or yes, who's put out the RFP, or who's posted on whichever website you're using to find your potential contracts. And they're the ones you're going to be negotiating with. That's your contract officer, contract officer. You have the end user who you're actually doing the work for. You are the subcontractor or
We'll say service provider. If you're a
service provider.
subcontractor, you don't generally even need to speak to the client or end user, as we've kind of described them here. If you're a subcontractor, then your boss is pretty much the prime consultant. The prime consultant is the person that's going to generally submit the bid to the contract officer that
Okay.
connects you to the end user. I
Yeah.
hope that was
Yes.
not too crazy.
Nope. That makes sense. Okay. My last question, and I thank you for giving me the extra time today.
Yeah, of course.
But I don't want to keep you longer than I'm supposed to. My last question, because you've given us a ton of information, is very quickly, Unica, tell us who you are and how you come to have this knowledge in this space and what you do.
Okay. I'm a proposal manager and writer. I started in this industry taking a bet on myself. I quit my job in mortgage and took an 8-week contract position 10 years ago this month, actually. And so that's how I come into this knowledge. I've worked at firms as small as 50 people and as large as 50,000 people, putting together proposals ranging from architecture and engineering to IT. I tell people, like, whatever you put on my desk, because the reality is, like, if you've got a firm system about how to respond, it doesn't really matter what you're responding to if you know how to really activate your subject matter experts and get what you need.
Okay.
And so that's how you become a $1 billion bid writer. You know the system.
That's amazing. And now you've stepped out and you have your own business outside of your contracting work. What is that?
Yeah. So that is where I'm really focused on personal branding. I think that it's the secret sauce to anyone's professional endeavors, whether you are an entrepreneur or an employee or an entrepreneur, intrapreneur, somebody like myself, to really grow your relationships and your network. And I think sometimes people think about, like, well, that's about follower count. That's not how I operate. I don't think that it serves us to know 10,000 people, but then when you get ready to sell some lip gloss, you can't sell one because you don't have relationships. And so I tell people all the time, it's not the writing, it's the relationships. I was just featured on a billboard in New York Times, in Times Square last month. That
Congrats.
is a byproduct of a relationship that happened because I hosted my own podcast. And I hosted a podcast because I thought it would be fun.
Very nice.
Oh,
Well, were you featured? What was the
uh,
feature?
we were having a personal branding retreat, and they just said, "Look, these are the icons in the making." And so I was really excited to be a part of that.
Yes, congratulations. Okay, so as you guys can hear, Unica has a massive amount of knowledge in the government contracting space, which is available to all of you guys, to all of us, as well as the branding space. And you have expertise in the growing AI space as well. So there are
Yeah.
a ton of ways that you can serve and help
Yeah.
people and answer questions. So tell people how they can reach you and connect with you.
Uniquekawalcott.com. If you see my name on the bottom of the screen, that's how you spell it, because I don't want to ruin your day. It's pretty easy. LinkedIn, I'm pretty good at responding to DMs. I'm not shy. You want to send me a note? I love to connect and just chat with people.
Wonderful. This has been so educational for me. Like I got a download of just all the moving parts, secret tips to find information and understanding. And I know there's so much more, and there's no way we can cover everything in 45 minutes, but you
Yeah.
truly like shaved a little bit off the iceberg, and that helps. Like, but thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you, Kanisha.